Hey everyone, I'm Brian Parks, and in this video, I thought I'd take a look back at a Linux distribution that I used a long time ago. This was actually the first Linux distribution that I ever used, um, and I thought I'd look at the current state now. And this Linux distribution that we're going to take a look at is, well, back then it was called Mandrake. Um, and then shortly after I started using it, they actually merged with another company and called their Linux distribution Mandriva, Mandriva. Um, and to be honest, I'm not sure that I used it all that much after the name change. I think I moved on to Fedora and Debian by that point. But I thought I'd kind of take a look at the current state of that Linux distribution. And in that with this Linux distribution, that's a really easy thing to do because the company that made it actually is now defunct. So there is no more Mandrake Linux, there is no more Mandriva. However, the project was kind of taken up by the community, so there's something called OpenMandriva, which is kind of the community-driven effort, kind of a fork or continuation of what they were doing. So that's what we'll take a look at in this video. So I'm going to pull up VirtualBox here, and let me make sure you can see my screen. There we go. Okay, so I have VirtualBox here. I have a demo VM set up, and let me just make sure everything's set up right. Yep, good. Okay, so I have VirtualBox actually has a setting you can choose to say that the type of Linux that you're going to be running in this VM is Mandriva. I thought that was kind of odd since Mandriva hasn't been a company for at least 5 years, I believe. I think it was 2014, 2015, somewhere around there that they went defunct. But anyway, I've grabbed the ISO from the OpenMandriva Linux website and attached it to the optical drive. So let's go ahead and start this VM. Now, the reason I didn't install it to the hard drive is because there is actually a live CD, so I wanted to keep this hard drive free for other um, Linux distributions. So we'll just boot the live CD. So yeah, we'll start OpenMandriva, and in just a few seconds, we'll actually get there's some sound that goes along with it to indicate that it's logged in. But here it's booting. And first impressions on the boot process, it's a lot cleaner than I remember it being. And this is kind of something that's common to all Linuxes. Most Linuxes back then, when I started in the early 2000s, they had this scrolling text as the kernel booted up and various services booted up. And now most Linux distributions just show a splash screen during that process. So that's really nice. It kind of gives a much nicer feel. So then you can see OpenMandriva. I think that's a little progress bar under the logo. So it's loading. It's loading the live CD. It takes a little bit longer because it's loading off of CD-ROM media or virtualized CD-ROM media as opposed to off a hard drive. And then we get that chime indicating that it's loaded up, we're logged in. And it looks like this, so I don't know if you noticed in the name of the ISO, but it did say plasma in it. That's because they're using KDE Plasma, which is kind of the current version of KDE. Back then it was using KDE as well, but it was the then current version of KDE, I don't know, 2, 3, whatever. It was by today's standards, a super old version of KDE. And back then, KDE and GNOME looked drastically different. Sure, you could probably customize them to make them look similar, but they both look drastically different. Now, all the desktop Linux experiences tend to look pretty similar, but here you can still tell that it is KDE. KDE is notorious for having this kind of double height bar at the bottom by default, and a switcher, a pager. This button is how you get to. It's kind of like the start menu on Windows. KDE has always tended to be a little more similar to the Windows look and feel than GNOME has. And that'll actually come back around. I'll mention something as we go through this. This is new. I don't remember this being here, this OM welcome. But if we go through kind of the information, as I said, KDE Plasma, LibreOffice, obviously that didn't exist back then. OpenOffice did. It was a Sun project. Sun got bought by Oracle. Oracle changed the licensing on a bunch of Sun projects. So LibreOffice spun off from OpenOffice. LibreOffice has come a long way. 6.4, I think, is a fairly up-to-date version. Obviously, the kernel, let's go back here, 5.5, that's super recent, that's fairly up-to-date. KDE Plasma, of course. Then they've got their own OpenMandriva things, which I think Mandrake had their own custom control center, probably based on the KDE control center, kind of underlying pieces. But then they have this OM feeling, which is definitely new and something that I think is pretty cool. So you've got the default look and feel, which is what I've got here. Then the out of the box, like the Plasma default, and a dark version of the theme. And then you can actually make it look like Ubuntu, Windows 10, Windows 7, and macOS Mojave. I did play around with these before I started recording this video, and I will say, if you're looking, or if you're expecting them to look exactly like Windows 10, I tried out Windows 10 and the macOS one. If you're expecting it to look exactly like those operating systems, you're going to be disappointed. However, if you're familiar with those and you don't really want to learn a new UI paradigm, it's similar enough that you can get by with it. So one of the key things, I'll actually pull up this feeling like pain in a minute. But two important things are the placement of things like the dock. So on Mac OS, there is some version of a dock that shows up at the bottom of the screen. So it's in a familiar place. It kind of shows familiar types of things to Mac OS users. And the button order on modals, on confirmation modals. So yes and no, okay and cancel, those sorts of things will be more familiar. If you're familiar with Mac OS and you try the Mac OS theme, you get yes on the right hand side and no on the left. If you're on Windows, Windows actually has those the other way around. Yes is on the left, no is on the right. So if you choose the Windows 10 theme, you'll get yes on the left and no on the right, as you expect. One weird thing about the macOS Mojave theme is that the window controls are still on the right side, the top right corner, not the top left corner like you'd expect from macOS. Yeah. Now, another thing that's really cool is not on this screen, but under applications, so I could have just clicked applications, they actually have a lot of really good applications pre-installed. Let me make that bigger. Some of which I might actually look at, on Windows. So semantic mind mapping, I didn't know that existed. Zim, that looks cool. I might check that out. Home Bank, I've actually been looking for a good personal finance system. And so far haven't found one. Haven't been looking real hard. But Home Bank looks interesting. And then, of course, you've got some graphic stuff. Some stuff for the internet. It looks like Firefox and Chromium are both installed by default. Some multimedia stuff. Then, of course, your development tools. That's pretty cool. Some utilities. This one kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't really want Flash Player installed, but okay. But it does look like they are still gearing this toward kind of the new user, someone who's never used Linux before, to give them a good experience. So it's not, some Linux distributions are very hard and fast on the free and open source only train, and some kind of allow some of the proprietary, less open, less free software to allow you to work with things like, Wi-Fi cards, or in this case, Flash Player, right? And then of course games. What computer would be complete without games? So you've got those as well. So I did mention that I would show the look and feel settings. I think that shows up in, yeah, settings, desktop presets. Yeah, so OpenMandriva is what I'm on now. And then of course you can make it look like Ubuntu. Windows 10, Mac OS, Windows 7, if you want Windows 7. And basically what it does is it potentially changes the location of the menu, the launcher, which is this thing, the icon set that it uses. So so some of these icons, right? These are the default OpenMandriva icons. In the Windows 10 theme, something like that, it looks much more like the standard Windows 10 icons. And similarly on Mac OS, or with the Mac OS theme. Obviously button order, I mentioned that already. And then how you do certain click events. So it looks like most of these do double click, but the default does single click for some things. So there's that. Sorry, because this is a live CD, I don't have VirtualBox guest editions installed, so it doesn't populate the entire screen, and there are some other weirdnesses. Of course, this being a live CD, you can still install OpenMandriva. Oh, and that's where the single click comes in. So if I click that, it'll pull up the installer, and it'll help me install this to the hard drive that I have attached to this VM. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to cancel. Do I really want to cancel? Yes, I do. But on the whole, this seems a lot nicer and definitely more modern than when I used Mandrake back in the day. Back in the day, I was using Mandrake mostly for a Linux server, so I didn't use the UI all that much. However, because of the setup I was using, I had 2 physical machines. I did actually have a GUI on the Linux machine, and I did use it relatively frequently. I wasn't doing things like OpenOffice or anything like that. I had my Windows machine that I would do, I would use Microsoft Office in. But this is pretty classic for a the modern version of this distro, Mandrake. So yeah, maybe worth checking out. It looks like it's a good distro to get your feet wet with, as it was for me, back at least 15 years ago, close to 20 years ago now. I personally have some issues with some of the look and feel. Like I'm not a huge fan of this large panel at the bottom, taskbar. Obviously, I have the Windows taskbar there, but I don't really like how much screen space this takes up. So I'd want to change that. KDE is not really my first choice of desktop environment. I've been using GNOME a lot more lately, though I definitely I can complain about both of them equally probably. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good place to get started. So hopefully you found that useful. It was kind of fun to go back and check out this old, or the new version of this Linux distribution that I used back in the day. So if you like this video, go ahead and click that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel for more like this, and some coding videos, and some talking about how to get a job in tech, and how to advance in your current tech job. I talk about a lot of different stuff on this channel, and of course you can go back and see my older videos. Again, hit that thumbs up button if you like this video. Subscribe, share this with your friends and colleagues, and let me know in the comments what other distributions you'd like to see. Coming up, I've got Fedora, probably Debian and maybe some others. I might even check out some distributions that I've never used before. This is not a Linux distribution review channel, but Linux is something that I get into and something that I am excited about. So I'll devote a little bit of time to doing some Linuxy stuff. But leave a comment below about other things you want to see on the channel. And with that, I'll let you go. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.